welcome back. And this week we're catching up on Doctrine and Covenants, section 63. Haven't done one for a while, so I thought we'd just pump this one out real quick. There's a couple of verses, there's a lot of rich stuff in these, so let's dig right into it. So in Doctrine and Covenants, section 63, verse 17, we have a verse here that talks about liars, whoremongers, sorcerers, things like that. This is a really interesting verse because it comes originally from Revelation 22:15. You can see it kind of has a lot of the same things in it. It has dogs, sorcerers, whoremongers. So in the Doctrine and Covenants version, we can see he left out the dogs, which is good because I like dogs. But it's interesting, he left in the sorcerers. We don't seem to really have too much of a problem today with sorcerers. Well, I didn't think we did anyway until I read this. So I did a bit of digging, and when you look at the verse in Greek, coming from John, it talks about dogs, obviously, but then it uses a term there called pharmakoi. This sounds a lot like the word pharmacist, and that's actually where we get the modern word pharmacist. So a pharmacist is somebody who mixes chemicals together to make you better. And it was the exact same thing back then as well. What they would do is they would mix chemicals, they would mix substances, herbs mainly, and these had the power to make you better, make you whole. And so it was a very specialized set of knowledge. And of course, with that knowledge comes great power, as we know. And what they used to do sometimes is they used to use this knowledge to hurt people. So they would poison people, make people sick. Some Roman emperors died as a result of this. So to me, the word sorcerer doesn't necessarily mean somebody who's involved in magic, even though nowadays that's what it's referred to, but somebody who uses their very specific technical knowledge to injure, hurt, or destroy. So this could be financial knowledge. It could be software engineering. It could be religious. It could be theological. You never know. Anybody who uses their knowledge to hurt other people. So that's just a bit of insight I saw on that. The next part that we talk about is the first resurrection. So a lot of people were wondering what the first resurrection is. And as you can see from the graph above, it's really anything from the start of Christ's resurrection all the way through to the millennium and up until the end of the millennium. And at the end of the millennium is the second resurrection. How do we know this? Well, we know this from Revelation chapter 20, verse 4, where it says, he's talking about all the people that he saw up in heaven during the millennium and before and after. And at the very end of that, he says they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. So that's the millennium. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. And then he loops back and says, this is the first resurrection. He goes on to talk about the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. So the second resurrection is the one that happens after the millennium. First resurrection is anything before then. So I hope that answers that question. So the next main part that we're going to talk about is the transfiguration. And the transfiguration in verse 20 there, he says, he that endureth in faith and doeth my will, the same shall overcome and receive an inheritance upon the earth when the day of transfiguration shall come. So again, he's been talking about a lot of this revelation stuff when the earth is celestialized, and then he refers to the day of transfiguration. And he specifies in 21 when the earth shall be transfigured. And he explains a little bit more about that, because when the earth is transfigured, he then goes back to when Christ was transfigured. And he says, even according to the pattern which was shown unto my apostles upon the mount, of which account the fullness ye have not yet received. Well, how do we know we haven't received that? Well, we have 3 books that talk about the resurrection, or the transfiguration. And that's in Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 to 8, Mark chapter 9, verses 2 to 8, and then Luke chapter 9, verses 28 to 36. But Luke actually adds in a few more details that are really interesting here. He adds in one verse in specific. There's a few others that he goes into that I'm not going to go into right now, but one in particular that's really, really interesting. He talks about Moses and Elijah and Christ, who appeared in glory and spake of his decease, which he should accomplish at Jerusalem. And if we look at the Greek for spake of his decease, we see the term elegon ten exodon autou. Exodon there is the Exodus. We know that from the book of Exodus, which just means departure, going out, evacuating, leaving. And that's what they talked about with Christ as well. So it's interesting that there was other stuff that was talked about there. One of the other things that's not mentioned is why Moses and Elijah. Well, Moses, Exodus, it all makes sense. He had the keys of gathering Israel as well. But why Elijah? Or sorry, I should specify that Elias is really just the name Elijah in Greek. So Moses and Elijah both never tasted of death. So we could say that they had the keys of over death, I suppose. And it's these keys that they bestowed upon Christ to give him power to take back his life again so that he could accomplish the resurrection. The resurrection we talked about again. So this is really important to understand, that there's an awful lot of stuff there that we don't know, and we still don't have the full account. But at least we know a little bit more, and hopefully have a little bit more history as to why that was said. So hope you enjoyed this lesson, and if you did, appreciate it. Thanks very much.